In lesson 11, we deal with the ratio of fractions and unit rates. Now, a ratio of fractions is where you have two quantities that are being compared that are fractions. So you have basically a fraction of fractions, and what you end up getting is this complex fraction, like what you see in purple on the screen. So I have 5/6 compared to 1/3. And what you need to remember about ratios is that they can be written three different ways. The first way is with the colon. The second way is with the word two. And the third way is like a fraction. But when the ratios are already fractions themselves, you get a fraction over a fraction. And what you need to remember is that a fraction just tells us to divide. So I can rewrite the ratio as a fraction of a fraction and get this expression. When I want to find the unit rate, we know that we have to take one quantity divided by the other quantity to get the rate. So when we end up with this complex fraction, the first part looks very complex, but when we put it into a division expression, we can solve it very quickly. Let me use the keep, change, flip method. Where we keep the first fraction, we change division to multiplication, and then we take the reciprocal of the second fraction. And we end up with 15/6, which can be reduced to 2. And so 6 times 2 is 12. We have 3 left over. 2 and 3, 6. And we know that a 3/6 is the same as 1/2. So 2 and 1/2. So this big, scary, complicated looking beginning fraction actually is equal to 2.5. And that could be any kind of rate. It could be miles per hour, words per minute. Doesn't matter. It's 2.5. Now, let me show you an example that we can use fractions for that end up in this form. When we're trying to find better buy, we know we can find the unit rate and compare the unit rates. So, which is the better buy, 2.5 pounds of ham for $10.25, or 3 1/3 pounds of ham for $12.50? Now, at first, you might ask, well, why can't we just use decimals? We can divide decimals. We can find the unit rate of decimals very easily. But what happens is we have 3 1/3 pounds. And that 3 1/3 does not have a nice decimal. 3 1/3 is 3.3 repeating. And that ends up being kind of messy. And we've seen in previous examples where you get rounding error. So rather than experience rounding error, we can express everything in terms of a fraction. So let's look at 2.5 pounds for $10.25. And 4.25 is fit into $1, so 25 cents will be 1/4 of $1. And 3 1/3 and 12.50 would be $12.50. So when we're talking about unit price, we want the cost per pound. So that means we take the dollar amount and divide it by the pounds. So we're going to end up with, for the first example, 10 1/4 divided by 2.5. And the second one's going to be $12.50 divided by 3.5, or 3 1/3. So a little bit of a refresher on dividing fractions. Okay, I'm going to rewrite my first expression. And in order to divide fractions when they're mixed numbers, we first need to make them into improper fractions. So to make 10 and 1/4 into an improper fraction, I gotta figure out how many fourths that would be. Well, there are 4 fourths per whole. So 4 times 10 would be 40, and then we have to add that 1/4, so it'd be 41 fourths divided by, and there are 4 halves in 2, 2 times 2, 4, plus 1 more by 5. Use the keep, change, flip method, and I'm going to end up with 82, and 20 goes into 82 4 times, with 2 left over, and 2 20ths, this is the same as 1/10. So 4 and 1/10, or 4, and we want to think of percent as 100, so that should be 10 cents, $4.10 per pound. Now let's look at the second one. We have 12 and a half divided by 3 1/3. And rewrite those as improper fractions. 12 times 2 is 24, plus 1 more is 25 halves. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. We're going to end up with 25 halves times 3/10. 25 times 3 is 75. 2 times 10 is 20. And 20 goes into 75 3 times. That gives me 60. We'll end up with 15 left over. Divided by 5 to reduce. So I'll get 3 3/4 of a dollar per pound. And 3/4 of a dollar, or 3/4, is equal to 75 cents. So the unit rate, or the cost per pound, is $4.10 for the first one and $3.75 for the second. So the better buy is 3 1/3 pounds for $12.50.